one needs to let them know ahead and fax in a copy of one's identity papers and so on and so forth. The Jewish communities have security arrangements for themselves. They're well organized. There's a national organization for monitoring and dealing with security issues among the Jewish communities in Sweden. There is no, like in Germany, for instance, this is sponsored by the police for historical reasons, obviously. This is not the case in Sweden. There is police enforcement and aid only on the high holidays, for instance. Then there's usually a police car positioned by the synagogues, because that's when most of the Jews go to attend prayers. As for the Jewish community and their sizes, it depends who one asks. But let's say that the number of Jews are among 10 to 20,000. It depends. There are 20,000 individuals in Sweden who would be eligible for Aliyah. Let's put it that way. As for the Muslim community, there isn't really any statistics made on immigrant communities in Sweden. It's not. I don't think that it's even legal to have national statistics on demographics in that way. So the reason I know about the Jewish community is the fact that the Jewish community itself keeps statistics of how many Jews there are in Sweden. There are no real. So one would have to go to the Turkish Association, the Iranian Association, and so forth, and ask how many members they had, and how many Turks and Iranians and so forth. They would assume that there are estimates that there are in Sweden. There is really, as far as I know, no government-sponsored statistics on that issue. Although Sweden is still a country to which people immigrate, yes. But I don't have any figures. Well, in the 90s, the largest group of immigrants came from the former Yugoslavia. When there was civil war on the Balkans, there were a lot of Yugoslav refugees coming to Sweden. Many of them Bosnians. But I wouldn't say that, from this perspective, the Bosnians, for instance, are a much smaller problem than Iraqis or Palestinians or other immigrants from the Middle East proper. Evangelical Christians, yes, evangelical Christians are greatly supportive of Jews in Sweden, or at least some vocal groups within the evangelical churches are. The state church in Sweden tends to be rather anti-Israel, or very anti-Israel to a certain extent, especially because the Church of Sweden is a political organization. It's organized with political elections, and the political parties have representative power in the parliament, so to speak, of the church. And the political majority within the church reflects the political majority in the country as a whole. So the socialist bloc is in charge of the church also. There is support from many different evangelical groups. However, evangelical groups in Sweden are very marginal, and they don't have a strong public voice, and they're mainly, I must say, they're mainly ridiculed if they're discussed at all in public debate in Sweden, because of the fact that we have a state church in Sweden, and that the church historically has been a part of the establishment in Sweden. The ridicule of opposition groups, also within the church, was a part of keeping the status quo before the establishment of democracy in Sweden. And so this attitude of looking down on evangelicals is still prominent in Swedish society today, and certainly among secular Swedes and in the So support from evangelical groups is not really, I mean, it's strong, but it's inconsequential because they don't have much support to give.
Joseph, identify.
Your statement about the fact that they don't consider Judaism today or Islam to be an outgrowth or progression, call it what you want, of Judaism, it really totally surprises me because I thought it was part of Muslim core belief that Muhammad is Khatam al-Anbiya, which means the last of the prophets, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad. Are they saying that this is not so, or are they saying that these are not like some pro-Nazi groups? I remember some years ago in the United States I used to read that the Jews of today are really Khazar Jews. That means, you know, the descendants of the Jews of Kingdom of Khazar. And which one of those two are they?
Let's just stay there. Fine.
Okay, you keep on talking about the Muslim community as if it's homogeneous, which I'm sure it isn't. So, are there any who are more open to dialogue, perhaps, than others in Sweden? That's one issue. A second point is about the level of violence. I'm assuming it's getting worse, and how bad is it? And the third question is in terms of the legal issue. In other words, have any of these people ever been prosecuted for either incitement, aside from Ahmed Rami, who we know was taken off the air? Have any of them ever been prosecuted? And just one quick comment. I think that the Swedish initiative to promote Holocaust education is in certain respects actually serving as some sort of fig leaf for Sweden on every other issue. In other words, whenever there's any criticism of Sweden on any issue relating to Jews, Israel, Jewish people, right away they point to the wonderful initiative of Goran Persson to promote Holocaust education. It's just, that's proof that they can't be at fault in any other way.
Two remarks. First of all, the story you tell about Sweden sounds very familiar for someone coming from Holland. I'm afraid we are a little bit ahead of the sad situation. Second point, I have followed for some time the developments in the Swedish church, especially with relation to the Swedish Theological Institute. One incident that some of you might know, that the former director of the Swedish Theological Institute, Dr. Johan Larsson, who was once invited to light one of the torches on Jon Haatsmoed, because of that honor was kicked off his position. So it's more remarks than questions.
Okay, this is for this round. We have another.
Okay. As for the Jewish roots of Islam, the remarks about that, these are views expressed by pupils in schools. So they're not Muslim scholars. They are, however, they're not taught that Judaism is the mother religion of Islam in Muslim schools or in Muslim Sunday school in Sweden. I'm sure that asked a question, an imam in Sweden would not deny this fact, because, as you said, it's a part of the core belief in Islam. It's not something that Muslims try to deny on a general theological stance. However, in a more familiar discourse, as I'm sure you know, theology, as it actually stands, and the way people perceive their religion is often two very different things. That's about that. As for the Muslim community in Sweden, yes, of course, it's very heterogeneous, and also as I hinted to, there are some groups within this community that is a bigger problem than others, such as, well, especially the Bosnians, which are a late addition to the Swedish Muslim community. They're really not a problem at all, because they haven't been exposed to this kind of anti-Semitism in Yugoslavia. They really cannot identify with the anti-Semitism brought forward by Muslims from North Africa or Iraq or Palestinians or Lebanese. We have many Lebanese refugees who came to Sweden also in the 80s. So yes, and as for partners of dialogue within the Muslim community, on the highest level, there are some moderate Muslims with whom there has been dialogue, especially the Imam I mentioned earlier, who's the Imam of the Great Mosque in Stockholm. However, most of these attempts to dialogue, and many of them have been fruitful. There's been different groups where Muslims, Jews, and Christians have come together and discussed religious issues. They were suspended after the outbreak of the Second Intifada, and only now they're starting to regroup. But as far as I know, they haven't really gotten anything off the ground yet. And also, there is a difference between these moderate members of the organized Muslim communities and the community as a whole. Now, for instance, in the wake of these reports about the sermons delivered in the Great Mosque in Stockholm and also in Uppsala, there has been claims from more moderate Muslims in the Swedish media that the Muslim Brotherhood has basically taken over the Great Mosque in Stockholm. Now, and there are competing national Muslim organizations fighting each other and so forth. I'm not really an expert on the different Muslim groups within Swedish society, but yes, of course, they have many different views, and some of them also look for dialogue with Jews also, not only with Christians, but they meet on a generally one could say that they meet opposition from within their community. And an indication of this is the fact that even unequivocally condemning the bombing in London caused the imam to be called a Jew and accused and threatened and threats against his life to be made. Yes, the violence, the level of violence. As I said, it's hard to say because the absolute numbers are small. And the Jews in Sweden are very careful to disguise their Jewish identity whenever they move about in the street in public. It's very rare to see Jews wearing kippot, for instance, in public. The only ones, as far as I know, who do on a regular basis are the Chabad members in Sweden. And the Chabad Shaliach in Malmö, where I live, he says that he doesn't. There are certain parts, even in the middle of the city, where he prefers not to go, and they're looking for another apartment. They live in a relatively nice area of the city, but they wish to move to somewhere closer to the synagogue because he feels harassed on a daily basis. As for prosecution against crimes of this kind, I don't know of any prosecution. Again,